So I was at the in-laws farm in Buffalo County, Wisconsin over the weekend, and got into a conversation with one of my wife's relatives about reselling. He sells on eBay, I sell on Etsy. We were talking about some of the things that we like to collect and sell and what was working for us. And this being our first year on Etsy and kind of getting the hang of carrying vintage items and all that stuff, I thought that, maybe it'd be fun to just walk you through what's sold so far in 2024 year to date. So this is that video. These are those items. I hope you enjoy. So first we have a vintage New Old Stock Imperial Frontier pocket knife, 2-blade in the Frontier Series box. This sold in March, shipped out to Indiana. I got the knife in a lot from a local auction house. It was an estate auction, a farm couple from New Ulm, Minnesota. And this pocket knife sold for $41.73, including tax. All our items are free shipping, so keep that in mind when you're looking at the prices. Next, we have an antique Little Giant hand crank corn sheller in working condition. This went out to Maine, a customer in Maine in March. I think it seemed like it might have been a hobby farm. So my dad has collected corn shellers for a long time. When I was a kid, we used to demonstrate at schools and historical events, corn shelling, milling, things like that. I'd never seen a Little Giant in person until I found this one. It's a nice little good working corn sheller. I like the design, and I'm sure the customer will get a lot of good use out of it. I love, little simple farm machines like that, and I'd like to deal in more of them. Next, we have another corn sheller. This is an antique Hibbert Spencer corn sheller, model HS1. Working corn sheller, good shape. Went out in May. Was shipped to Wyoming. I got a real nice review from the customer on this one. I had to do some digging to figure out which brand this one was. Hibbert Spencer, in the molds of the cast iron, they have an HS1. So I looked up that HS1 and kind of dug and found out that Hibbert Spencer was the manufacturer. Don't know much about that company, but maybe I'll run across some more. So that one went for $159, including tax. Next, an original IH Farmall Model B tractor owner's manual. That sold in May, right here in Minnesota, shipped out to. Came from a local estate with some other farm books and things like that. This one came with an original schematic diagram, which I don't believe many of them have. And it was a good sale. The customer left a really nice review. That went for $28.18. Next sale was a collection of 28 vintage Boy Scout patches in a wooden case, Minnesota and Wisconsin Boy Scout patches. That sold in June, shipped it to Alabama. I got the old patches from a thrift shop in Wabasha, Minnesota. I was a little unsure buying them. I do like vintage Boy Scout stuff. I kind of like everything from 1960s and 70s camping. And they ended up being not that hard to move. End cost on those was $84.24. Next is an antique Firkin bucket. I didn't know what a Firkin bucket was until I researched this one, and I still kind of don't, but I think it was formerly used as, a planter. It's just essentially an old wood bucket. It shipped out in July, went to Kansas, and the price on that one ended up being $78.12. Next is a galvanized steel metal Arctic 5-gallon water beverage cooler. That was a July sale also. It shipped out to Texas. I got the water cooler in Wabasha, Minnesota. It reminds me a little bit of like vintage boating. It kind of makes me think of the movie Grumpy Old Men. It also reminds me a bit of the movie Waterboy. Sort of that 1970s, 1980s sort of feel to it. The sale on this one was really interesting because it went to like an artistic concept bar in Texas. Really nice customers. We kind of walked through some questions, and it was just really neat to see that it would end up being decor in the bar, used, and they'd actually use it for water. So price on that one, $96.34. Next we have antique wooden Prohibition whiskey crate from Owensboro, Kentucky. That went out in July too. I was really happy to find it. It's got all the tax stamps and lettering from Prohibition. The whiskey was only allowed to be consumed for medical use, I think, during that time. I got it from a local online auction house. I asked a little higher price on this. I got an offer and countered it, and we reached an agreement. I actually ended up shipping it back to Owensboro, Kentucky, right where it came from. So a very neat piece for a local collector, and I'm excited for the customer. It was kind of good to return that piece back to its origin. The price we ended up agreeing on was $556.50 with tax. Next, we have vintage molded picture frames. Set of 3, oval Victorian trim. Now these are kind of like those molded Bakelite sort of picture frames. I had them for a long time before I put them on Etsy. I originally got them at a church rummage sale. They got kind of a neat aesthetic, and I'm sure that they were used for some type of arts and crafts project. That was an August 2024 sale, and shipped out to New Mexico. Total price on that was $22.60. Next, vintage authentic wire egg basket, apple gathering basket. So there's a lot of remakes of these. They're really popular, I think, in kind of that farmhouse, cottage core, farm core design. I got it from a estate sale. I was actually about to wholesale it to another antique seller. I wanted $25. Her highest was $20, so I decided to keep it. And then about a week later, it sold on Etsy. So the end cost on that, or the end price on that to the customer, was $60.06. Next, we have a vintage Gers German lidded beer stein with ornate design. Another August sale, shipped to Ohio. I got it on an online auction. I didn't really know the value of these until I looked this one up. I had my doubts about kind of meeting this price point, but everything worked out and customer was happy. So their price was $118.77. Next, we have a vintage Mac Carl & Company fog maker sprayer. It's copper and metal, made in Cleveland, Ohio. It's an old oil can of some sort, fog maker. I don't know. I think it kind of mists the oil when you spray it out. It had like a kerosene or diesel fuel in it. I shipped that to Florida in August. I got it in a lot of oil cans from an estate sale, kind of south of Lewiston, Fremont area in Minnesota. Cleaned it up and it sold pretty quick. I got a really nice review from the customer too. The price on that was $52.19. Next, we have a vintage Covey galvanized tin 5-gallon water cooler. So after selling that first galvanized cooler, I noticed that there was kind of a market for those. I came upon another one, and actually this one sold pretty quick too, and it also shipped to Texas. So that was back in August. And the price ended up being $88.77. Next, we have vintage Carhartt Carpenter overalls, double knee, Union made in USA, insulated. Also an August sale. Went to Washington State. I was happy to have these overalls. Pleased to offer them, even though I usually don't list textiles on Etsy. Sizing, returns, zippers, all those issues. These were American-made Carhartts and came again from a local auction house, and they went pretty quick. Price for those was $122.43. In September, someone ordered the antique iron Eucharistic Communion wafer press, Roman Catholic Eucharistic wafer mold, religious wafer making tool, patent July 26, 1881. So a lot of rural Catholic churches are closing and consolidating in our area,
and I assume that this came out of the basement of one of them. This was offered at a local auction. I wasn't even following it, but I was watching the auction floor and happened to see it closing, and I snagged it. It's a neat piece. There are a few similar examples online for sale. Interesting to think of priests actually holding these, kind of pudgy pie makers over the fire to make communion hosts. So again, that one went out to Oregon in September, and the price on that was $329. Next we have vintage tobacco tin, Union Leader pocket tobacco can, red metal cigarette case tobacco advertising. This one went out to Georgia in September. I actually got a big lot of tobacco tins at an estate sale. There's a lot of them I still have to list. I really like the old tins. I like the typography. I like old packaging, so it's fun for me. I also like kind of that aesthetic concept of an old general store, and I also like kind of the aesthetic concept of that old bachelor smoking his pipe, so like the farmer bachelor. So I like tobacco tins. I like related stuff. Price on this, $18.19 out to Georgia. A gentleman said that it completed his collection. After that, we had 2 handmade farm-style rope makers sold. So these my dad made, and he demonstrated them on his YouTube channel that I produce. The channel's called Ozzy's Oddities. So years ago, he'd made several of these, and he had his original and then 2 others left. So we decided to market them on Etsy. They both sold, and the rope making demonstration video actually ended up garnering over 130,000 views. That's, the most watched video on the channel up to this point. So really fun in a lot of ways. So each of these went for $201.49. Next sale, a large collection of Pioneer seed advertising and other seed company advertising, coffee set, kitchen knives, paring knives, and more. So this was a whole group of items that came again from a New Ulm farm estate. Just your typical seed advertising stuff, knives, coffee pot, kind of that sort of 70s and 80s vintage, a lot of them were. Actually, the buyer on this one was from Alaska. So I thought shipping might be kind of crazy, but it ended up being really reasonable. And the sale led to a really good review. So I'm appreciative of that. And price, $68. Next sale is an antique cast iron nutcracker made by P&L Company, Oshkosh, Wisconsin. So we process black walnuts, my parents do, and I've helped in the past. And this nutcracker was the first one that I found that would actually work with black walnuts because they have a really hard shell. I was considering keeping it, but I ended up listing it, and I kind of sort of priced it a little bit towards the higher end of the market because I wasn't totally sure if I wanted to part with it, but it sold pretty quickly, actually, to a buyer not very far from us in the southeastern Minnesota region. And price on that was $80.53. Next, a rare 1930s Dodge artillery hubcap, Dodge pickup part. This was just recently a November sale. I found the hubcap at an estate sale in Winona, Minnesota. Evidently they're relatively rare. This one wasn't in the best shape, but maybe the patina matched the truck project that the customer was working on. I don't know, that'd be one of those where I'd really like to know the story, but either way, went to California, and the price was $72.19. And the final sale, year to date, from our upstart Etsy store was a vintage Sheffield 3-blade stainless steel folding pocket knife. Again, from that same lot. This one had been up on Etsy for a long time. It was from that same lot of the first pocket knife we sold, which was actually our first vintage Etsy sale. But it had just come in, a buyer from North Carolina. And price on that, $31.07. And that's everything we've sold on Etsy year to date in terms of vintage items. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you found some things you were interested in, and it encouraged you to get out and collect or to look on Etsy for that item you need. If you'd like to visit our Etsy shop, I'll leave a link in the description. And I sure appreciate you being with us.